Hello and welcome to the Hollywood Experience. I'm Adrian Paul, and with me is David Bethke. Well, kind of. He's somewhere in the ether. David, you're somewhere.
Somewhere in the San Fernando Valley. We'll go with that.
So listen, guys. I want to get to the interview with Michael because we won't have a lot of time afterwards because it's a long interview. It's about 44 minutes, but there's a lot going on in this interview. Michael Lange, director, producer occasionally, funny man a lot of the time. Who I've met a couple of times on Ethan Detmeyer's Combat Radio, and as well as his Christmas events. And I enjoyed talking to Michael. And as I said, we have a second one coming up. But let's listen to the first one, and we'll be back right after that. Hello, Michael. Hello, thank you for joining me today on this chilly Californian day. You feeling the cold yet?
Oh. On those days when it doesn't get up to 70, I don't know what to do.
I know, this is the thing. We could tell people like, oh my gosh, it's a terrible day today. It was 70 degrees.
Right.
You know, it's fine during the day, but when you get to about 4 or 5 o'clock when the sun goes down, it goes down to about 55. Then it starts getting chilly. You know, then it's like, okay, now I'm going to put my coat on.
I don't think this is going to go over well with our viewers who are on the East Coast right now under 12 inches of snow.
Yeah, have they started the snow there yet? Because I saw that some of the camera, some of it has, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yep.
Oh God help us.
I think it's 4 degrees there, so that doesn't matter where the sun is when it's 4 degrees.
Yeah, it's kind of like coming from England. You know, in England, they basically, you know, anytime they see sun, they're out in their shorts. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's 50 degrees or 45 outside. It's sunny.
That's right.
We're going out. Yeah. Anyway, Michael, listen, you've had a amazing career. You've done so much TV, so many different things. Tell us how you kind of started in actually. I know you did commercials and you were an advertising exec at one point, weren't you?
Right. Yep. I was an agency producer. I was head of production at this medium-sized advertising agency. That was a great job. A lot of fun. You know, I don't know if you ever watched the show Mad Men.
Yes.
But that was exactly what I was. I was a madman.
So did you really kind of sort of identify with the show and the characters in it?
I actually couldn't even watch the show because it was just I've been there, done that.
Really?
So,
was that close? Was it?
I think that show took place in the 60s. So that was sort of the heyday of everything that happened there. I was in that business in the mid 70s. So, you know, I never got a house as a gift for giving someone a job. Although one of the producers at the agency I worked at, who had been there for many, many years, did get a house as a reward for giving a company a job.
Wow. That's kind of a big bonus, really, isn't it?
Yes, it was a summer house, not a full year-round house, but nevertheless, a house.
Oh, just a summer house.
That's right.
A house.
The biggest thing I got was a 12-ounce tin of beluga caviar. That was pretty nice.
That's not bad. Still expensive.
Someone gave me a cappuccino machine, and then of course I always had theater tickets and dinners out, and you know, it was a pretty high life.
So what made you kind of, because I know you were in Washington at the time, weren't you, in the state district of Columbia?
No, well, I went to school in Washington, but I grew up outside of New York City.
Outside New York.
My advertising stuff was in New York.
Right. So what made you have the crazy idea to come out to Los Angeles?
Well, I studied theater in college. And so that's what I always wanted to do anyway. So finally, after about 8 years in advertising, which, like I said, I mean, it was a blast. And I was at a pretty young age, I was the head of production of this pretty good sized advertising agency. So I was headed for, you know, a pretty great career, but I had this dream and I wanted to follow it. So I moved out to LA.
So you had a resume based on all the commercials you've done.
Right, which was basically useless because, you know, both businesses look at the other business as you know,
insignificant, not really. Yeah. So how did you get your first TV series was Fall Guy, wasn't it?
The Fall Guy.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, I remember that way back. So how did you get that?
I had a cousin who was in the business. He was a producer and a director, and he would get me meetings. You know, he was the one who encouraged me to move out to LA. So actually, I learned a good lesson because I was waiting for him to say, I have a job for you, come out to LA. And I realized finally, after 8 years in advertising business, that that was never going to be said. I had to commit and move to LA, then I would get the job.
Right.
Good life lesson. So I moved to LA, and then he got me meetings with various shows, and finally there was a show that he uh, did a brief stint on called The Fall Guy, and one of his conditions for doing the show for them as a producer was that they had to hire his cousin at at whatever rate it was. I was making pretty crappy money at the time, but it didn't matter. But they had to hire me in whatever position they created for me. So they created this position of I was the stock footage librarian.
Oh, really?
Yes, which was not a real position, except I organized their stock footage library. And then I didn't really know anything about TV show, how things were produced. I mean, I knew how to produce a commercial, but I remember my first production meeting, like in commercials, when we would have our production meeting, it would take the better part of a whole day.
Mm-hmm.
And it was for a 30-second commercial.
Yeah, that always surprised me about that. I mean, I've not sat in on them. I've been in advertising agencies before and talked to them. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that, because there is a very big difference between pre-prepping in a TV show compared to a commercial.
Oh, huge difference. Because the first production meeting I went to on The Fall Guy, it lasted, an hour. And I'm like, what? This is crazy. But anyway, so I started, I put together their stock library, organized it, run bys and stock shots of Beverly Hills, whatever they had collected in their shooting. And then I didn't really know how anything was done. I remember my first, but I would make sure to sit in all of the screenings of all the dailies. In those days, everything was on film. So if you wanted to see the dailies, which is the footage that was filmed the day before, you had to go to a screening room, and everyone was there. So there was a lot to be learned from that. And one day there was a scene where the director had screwed up something, or maybe it wasn't in the script. So they needed to. There was some bad guys that why didn't they just? I can't even remember all the details. But anyway, my assignment was I had to find a cave, because they were going to shoot another little scene inside this cave. So I was like, okay, because one of the things is very important is never say no. Just whatever they want, just say yes, and then figure it out later how to do it. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm on a big movie lot. I guess there must be some cave somewhere. So I find out that there's a plastering department. Now, again, I don't think this exists today. Today, it would be not that easy to get. So I went to the plastering department, and I talked to this old guy, and I said, oh, I need a cave for an insert for The Fall Guy. And he says, well, what kind of cave do you need? So he points up, and sure enough, on the ceiling, like hung like 20 feet up on the wall in this gigantic stage, there's like 30 different kind of caves.
Really?
Yeah.
He's a production designer, was he? Or was he a set builder?
He managed all these set pieces.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And so I saw one that looked like it matched sort of the area that they were shooting in. Anyway, I said, how about that one? Fine, where do you want it? So I said, oh, send it to, and I gave him the address where the thing needed to go to. And also, I always thought I'm the lowest person on the show, and I was able to go and get a cave. It was pretty cool. And like, oh my God, I'm in Hollywood. What kind of cave do you want?
So how did you, go on, Karen? Sorry, Karen, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Things progress, and then there was this again, another director who was a friend of the producer, and he wasn't really that great of a director. He had left out this pretty significant section, which would sort of storytelling wise. So we're in the screening, and Glenn Larson was the exec producer, and he always left everything to the last second. So we were screening this cut on, I believe it was a Tuesday or Wednesday, and the show was going to be having to be on the air the following Wednesday. So that's pretty tight.
Yeah.
So he sees this gigantic hole in the story, and he said, "Oh my God, this doesn't work. We need to shoot something to fix this. How are we going to do this?" So I heard opportunity knocking at my door, and I said, "I know how to fix it." And I didn't, of course. It's again the same theory, just say yes, then figure it out later. And fortunately, no one asked how I was going to fix it. They just said, okay, because in Hollywood, like if someone volunteers to do something that seems like it is impossible or you might get fired because of it, no one wants to do it. So whoever jumps in, so they figure, well, Michael could get fired if he fucks it up. So anyway, the sequence was, you're not going to believe this. It was a roller derby, a woman's roller derby. So this was sort of my first experience with action stuff. So it was a woman's roller derby team that they had shot a few weeks earlier. So there had to be, I can't remember there was some big story thing that needed to be told in this little scene that I was going to shoot. So I had already been shooting inserts. So I had a guy who was a good double for Lee Majors, who was the fall guy. And I had a guy who was a good double for his sidekick, Howie. And so I had to shoot at the Olympic Auditorium, which I think is still there. It's in downtown LA. So I call, and again, I want to emphasize, I'm the lowest person on the show. There's no one lower than me. But this was in a day when things were so much more loosey-goosey.
Relaxed, yeah, I agree. Yeah.
This would never happen today. So I called the company that had provided, it was a team, roller derby team. I called them up and I said, I need 6 of your women at the Olympic Auditorium tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning. Oh, I introduced myself. I lied and said I was a producer on The Fall Guy. And
that's what you do in Hollywood, though.
Exactly. So they said, okay, great. So, I had already called the Olympic Auditorium and booked that. Again, no paperwork. I just said, I'm a producer on The Fall Guy. I need your place tomorrow at 8 o'clock for about 5 hours. They went, okay. And I had a company that had been shooting my little run-bys and inserts. So I booked them to come down. So I put this whole thing together and sure, I shoot. I learned a lot about backlight and how you could, because the guy who was the Fall Guy double was very good, but it didn't look exactly like Lee Majors. Right. But if you backlight, then you can't really tell because it's sort of a silhouette. As long as he's wearing that identifiable Fall Guy jacket, you're good to go. So I shot this whole sequence, and then the next day now we're in Daly's, and Glenn Larson is there, and I'm nervous as a cat, and he starts giggling. And he said, this is going to work great. Great job. And that was that. So after that, anytime they had, shots that needed to be done to fix things, I was the go-to guy.
So you got in there by taking an initiative in a sense.
Exactly. I raised my hand.
It's funny. I was watching. There's a series right now called Selena, which is based on the singer, Selena. Uh-huh. And there was a scene because I just started watching it because my kids wanted to watch it. So I started watching it, and there's a scene where the father's standing there going, "Okay, so where are you going to get the manager?" He says, "I'm going to get the manager." And the son goes, "Well, I've tried." He said, "What about the drummer?" He says, "Well, I've tried him. I tried him before." He said, "Have you tried him lately?" He said, "Well, I've sent him an email." I said, "Are you waiting for him to email you back?" He goes, "Yeah." He says, "No, you can't do that." And the lesson was, if you want it, you've got to go out and get it. You can't wait for somebody to ask for you to do it. And I think it was exactly the same stories you're telling me that was 30, 40 years ago.
Yep. Exactly the same thing. No one's going to come up and say, hey, you look like you could be a director. Would you like to do that? That's just not going to happen.
Right.
You have to get out there and you have to, put yourself out there. I mean, I didn't really think of it as a big risk, but whenever I think about that, it was a huge risk for me. I could have lost my job if I had screwed it up. And like I said, I didn't really, I mean, I had read books and obviously I knew my way around a set because of advertising, but I didn't know how to do this. I just did it. I just called and I figured what's the worst that could happen.
Yeah, it's a bit like when you're a baby, you haven't stuck your finger in the light socket yet. And
Right.
until you do, you don't know you're going to get burnt. So, like, my friend was a producer friend of mine said to me years ago, he said, I don't know I said, don't worry about it. Just go and do it. You've got no problem. If you have fear, because later on we have fear of, I can't do this. I'm not going to be good enough. We don't have that when we're younger. So get rid of it. Get going. Otherwise, you're not going to go anywhere.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's actually through my entire career, the thing that, I mean, I'm a pretty mellow guy, and on the set, even though there's a lot of pressure, I always try to keep calm. And the only thing that gets me insane is the attitude that we can't do it. Because it's the movie business. You can do anything. It's the magic. You have the movie magic.
Right.
So if someone says we can't do that, it drives me crazy. Because you can do it.
You can do it if you find a way around it, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing. You said something a minute ago about what it was like and what it is like, and I totally agree. I mean, I've been on sets today compared to I was back in the 80s, and the difference is vast from the paperwork that's involved, the protocol that's in front of you, what you can and cannot say. I mean, there's so many different things today that I almost feel like you're doing it based on there's not some of that creative side has been taken out of it because your hands are kind of tied from what the executive or the storyboards have already predetermined you should do.
Right. That's true. Yeah. I mean, it was definitely a lot more freewheeling situation back then. However, I must say, I think that the quality of television today is.
Oh, yes.
Better.
It is. Well, you've got the technical knowledge today is so much greater. I mean, you were talking about shooting on film. When I was doing Highlander, we were shooting on Super 16. And so, that's out the window. There's none of that anymore, So, I mean, but today it's digital. You can keep the camera rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling. It's just digital film. It's not before you had to take the film, you had to go and get it processed. Like you said, you then had to go and transfer it to tape and then sit there and watch it. So it's a much longer process. Today, you get it done. So you can take more risks in a sense in the filming because I think you've got, you make a mistake, you just reshoot it. It's only digital,
Yep.
So what happened after that? I mean, because you got the Fall Guy going, and then you went into Hunter and TJ Hooker and Riptide and all those. How did that sort of progress go? Did that kind of move into it? Or?
What happened was on the Fall Guy, I started shooting more and more stuff for them, and they always, it was, they liked my work. So at some point, the guy who was the second unit director, who did all, there was a second unit that did all the stunts, chases and stuff like that. He was not really, he was more he was a stunt guy, and he didn't ever really think that much of the story. So there were two things that kind of killed him off. One was there was the opening sequence of the next season that I started working on the show was the Fall Guy is driving along a road and in a Lamborghini Countach, right? Lamborghini Countach, and he drives off this cliff and he's flying through the air. Hits the button in the car, a parachute comes out, the car floats to the ground, this beautiful woman gets, heads up to the car and gets in and they drive off into the sunset. So that was this opening sequence. So this was in the 80s, in the mid 80s, early 80s. So there was no visual effects of any, to speak of, certainly not for a TV show. So they were like, how the hell are we going to do this? So I had heard of this company that did miniatures. So I said, we could do it with miniatures. And they're like, how the hell does that work? So I showed them, put together a little presentation. This company had only done one sequence. It was a train it was for a TV movie, and a train went out of control, went off the tracks and crashed through some, some area, and it looked fantastic. So I showed that to these guys, and they said, "Oh, that's great." So I said, "So I'll use this company, so we'll shoot the miniatures." Well, it turned out so fabulous, and of course, no one is going to get hurt, because if you launch a car off of anything, there's a chance that someone could get hurt.
Right.
So no one's going to get hurt with miniatures. So then, as the scripts would come in, I would then look at the script and see if I could do a good job in miniature. So more and more, I started shooting all these big stunts in miniature. So I felt bad for the guy, the poor second unit guy. All he would do is shoot the lead ups. And then the big, like when he would shoot the car, goes off the road, and then goes over the edge and smashes in the, down, hits the train or whatever, hits in I did one where it hits this radio tower, and the tower collapses, and there's electricity and a fire explosion. None of that. He didn't do any of that. He just did, the car drives off the road, and then I took it from there. So he had zero fun. He hated me.
So tell me how big are the miniatures? I mean, are they kind of like, like 3 feet tall, 2 feet tall? What sort of sizes are they?
We built a miniature Fall Guy truck, and I would say it was 5 feet long. Mm-hmm. So it was a quarter size. A fifth, maybe a fifth of the size of the real truck. And every detail was perfect.